Okay, welcome Teresa, Dr. Teresa Towpik. What is special is when amazing people like Carol and now lots of doctors are starting to appear to help spread the word about the excellence of cannabis for medical, dealing with certain medical conditions. So thank you very much for coming to Mardi Gras, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Kate, and thank you so much for your kind introduction. And thank you everyone to coming here this morning and showing your interest in medicinal cannabis. And I've got really good news to share with you. As a GP, since mid-March this year, I've been able to prescribe medicinal cannabis. It's been a fight for me. Since July last year, I couldn't go any patients through. And now, in New South Wales, the process became simplified. Each of the application takes about 2 or 3 days. I don't even have to have an endorsement from specialist. I need just to show that I'm willing to communicate with other doctors, specialists, and my applications have been approved within 2 or 3 days. I'm focusing mostly on chronic debilitating pain, not responding to other pharmaceutical agents. I'm hoping that it will change. I'm an optimist, and I'm sure that cannabis will become widely available in many forms, whichever form we like. We have the right to choose. I'm hoping that it will be possible to grow a small number of plants, because I also believe in using every part of the plant, especially the raw parts. But also, I believe we will have access to wonderful formulations of cannabis, and we will be, as doctors, will be able to use it. So what we are experiencing now, it's almost like an expansion of global cannabis interest. It has been widely accepted by general public, but many doctors, many of us doctors, feel uneasy, uncertain about it, because this plant has been labeled for such a long time as a criminal, dangerous, and highly addictive, and it's been so stigmatized. I now feel very passionate about it, but only until about 2 years ago, I have no idea about medicinal properties of cannabis. To me, like to many doctors, it was just a drug of addiction. But once I started reading and researching about it, I changed my attitude. And in a way, I feel I'm almost addicted to it, but in a good way, knowledge about it. So practically, I study and research every day. I never knew about such a rich history of cannabis. We know that it has been used for humanity by thousands of years. But what I focus on now is the 100 years between 1840 and about 1940, 1937, where doctors were prescribing medicinal cannabis, and it was made and dispensed by pharmacists. So cannabis was introduced to Western medicine in 1841 by famous Irish physician Sir William O'Shaughnessy. And it quickly became the mainstream medicine of 19th century, used in treatment of many medical conditions. So it was introduced to American pharmacopoeia in 1851 and was removed from that pharmacopoeia in 1942 and prohibited in 1937. But beginning of 20th century, major pharmaceutical companies like Eli Lilly, Bristol Myers Squibb, were the major sellers of medicinal cannabis. What I want to point out, that when it was prohibited in 1937, it wasn't doctors who banned it. In fact, the then president of American Medical Association, Dr. William Woodward, stated that prohibition of cannabis will stagnate its medicinal use and scientific research. And another important point is that in the beginning of 20th century, the major pharmaceutical companies started introducing single molecule synthetic agents. And from that on, doctors were trained to believe that therapeutic agents are mostly these provided to us by pharmaceutical companies. And we were trained to believe that herb, plants are inferior, unpredictable, and just not really useful. And when I was going through my training in the 80s, if something was mentioned herb, oh, it's just a herbal medicine, it doesn't work. So we really need to change our attitude about it. We need education and retraining. Now, in spite of prohibition in 1937, scientific research did happen. What's interesting that over the years, the scientific research into cannabis funded by government was focusing on negative aspects of cannabis, only for the scientists to discover the therapeutic properties of cannabis. And a lot of them got converted into embracing cannabis as an important therapeutic agent. One of the major discoveries was 1964. Oops, I'm sorry. Went too far. THC. In 1964, Professor Mechoulam, Israeli Professor Mechoulam from Israel, this isolated that THC, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, the most famous, most abundant part of cannabis plant, famous for its psychoactive effects. But we also know that this molecule possesses very important therapeutic effects, which among them is analgesic, anti-nausea, anti-vomiting, anticonvulsant, anti-inflammatory, and it's potent antioxidant as well. Discovery of THC opened the doors to further research and better understanding of how a brain and how a body function. And over the years, hundreds of other cannabinoids were discovered, and among them, CBD, very famous now as well, the second most abundant part of cannabis plant, which is non-psychoactive and highly therapeutic as well, and other minor cannabinoids as well. Now, over the years, further research led to isolation, cloning of our own cannabinoid receptors. Our bodies are actually abundant in these receptors. So first one was Cb2, followed by, Cb1, followed by Cb2. And that was followed by the discovery of our own endocannabinoids. So we, in a way, that's a very non-scientific statement, but I can say that in a way our bodies are producing our own cannabis, not to mention the word marijuana. So we had the anandamide, which the name comes from Sanskrit and meaning eternal bliss, and the 2-AG. Now, our bodies are densely populated by cannabinoid receptors. So CB1 receptors are mostly present in the central nervous system, in the brain, spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves. What's really interesting that there's hardly ever CB1 receptors in the brainstem, especially in the cardiorespiratory centers responsible for breathing and cardiac function. That's why there's no reported deaths due to cannabis overdose, as opposed to opioid receptors that can cause respiratory depression and death. Now, Cb2 receptors, I'm so sorry, I'm just struggling with the technology, so bear with me. Anyway, Cb2 receptors are mostly present in the immune system, but also other tissues, muscle, bones, and liver. Now, the cannabinoid receptors are activated both by cannabis and our own endogenous cannabinoids. That interaction is based on key and log analogy, where the cannabinoid is the key and the receptor is the log. So when cannabinoid molecule fits the receptor, what happens? I'm talking in a very simplistic way, but there are a couple of things that may happen. If that key fits the log and the key turns in the log, opens the door, something happens, and this is called agonistic reaction. So that molecule is called agonist. But sometimes We can put the key in the lock, but we are unable to turn it. We are unable to open the door. Nothing happens. So that's antagonistic reaction. So here, THC and endocannabinoids interact with cannabinoid receptors based on key and lock analogy. But also, I just want to go through very basic, scientific knowledge. With the receptors, there are different sides of the receptor. So the major side, where there is key and lock analogy, it's called orthosteric binding site. But also, molecule can attach to receptor on the other side, and it's called allosteric binding site. So THC binds with the cannabinoid receptors here based on key and lock analogy, and we call it partial agonist. It opens the door, but not completely, just partially. But CBD doesn't really interact all that much with cannabinoid receptors. It goes to the allosteric side, and it works like dimmer in the light switch. It changes the structure of the receptor. So this is one of the ways how CBD modulates the psychoactive effects of THC. So this is quite an important interaction. And once again, THC interacts with Cb1, Cb2 receptors, but CBD very lightly just binds to this allosteric side. But CBD is called promiscuous molecule because it interacts with so many other molecular pathways in our body. It interacts with many other receptors. So that's why we can see the concept of whole plant medicine. It's not just THC or just CBD. It's better if we have these molecules combined because they can affect many pathways. Now, all of these major discoveries of cannabinoid receptors, cannabinoids in cannabis plant, endocannabinoids led to unraveling of a very important system in human physiology. The endocannabinoid system, which was discovered about over 20 years ago, and some say that it was probably the most important discovery in human biology in 20th century, and doctors were never taught about it. Myself, I only learned about the endocannabinoid system about 2 years ago through my own research. So what is this endocannabinoid system? It is the universal, omnipresent system of internal regulation, cellular communication, and homeostasis. It is widely present about humans, plants, animals, except insects. It has probably appeared about 500 million years ago and kept on evolving. So this system consists of three major parts: the cannabinoid receptors, Cb1 and Cb2, the endocannabinoids that interact with these receptors, and the enzymes which are involved in synthesis and degradation. Here I'm just showing the enzymes involved in degradation of endocannabinoids, which is enzyme FAH, fatty acid amide hydrolase, and MAGL, monoacyl glycerol lipase. So I need to get some water. Now, that system is involved in the regulation of almost everything in our body. It controls stress, emotion, memory, cognition, sleep, digestion, inflammation, thermoregulation. It is involved in neural development, neuroprotection, movement, psychomotor behavior, pain regulation, cardiovascular, immune function, metabolism, appetite regulation. So that system is very, very important in our bodies. In short, we can say that system actually controls eating, sleep, relaxing, forgetting, and protecting. And the ability to forget is extremely important for us because if we remember everything, our life would be a nightmare. And that's what happens in people with PTSD. The ability to forget the traumatic experience is impaired, and that's why they suffer, which I mentioned about it in my next slide. Now, I'm just going to explain in very simple way. This is very simplistic and maybe at stage not 100%, I can't say inaccurate, but it's very, very simplistic. There's still a lot of research happening about endocannabinoid system. In fact, it's quite complicated. But anyway, here, I'm just showing how it works in the neuron, nervous cell. So here we've got the presynaptic neuron, postsynaptic neuron, and the synaptic cleft. Neurons communicate with each other through electrochemical impulses. We have here in these little vesicles at the end of presynaptic neuron, we have the neurotransmitters. There generate two types of neurotransmitters in the brain, inhibitory and excitatory. So it's like we have green light and red light. The green light is go forward, excitation. So, and the red light is just stop, don't go any further. So here it's almost like the traffic light, deciding you go further, you stop, you can't go any further. So how endocannabinoid system works? So when the electrical impulse called action potential comes to presynaptic neuron, there are many things happening, but one of them is opening of the calcium channel. Then it releases calcium. Calcium influx leads to opening of these vesicles and releasing neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters travel across the synaptic cleft and they bind to the receptors on the other side. The receptors on the other side are like bouncers in the nightclub. They either open the door or they close the door. They let you in or they won't let you in. And when they come to the postsynaptic neuron, if these neurotransmitters are in balance, regulated, they go further. And that's how the communication goes through the nervous system. But if they are upregulated, it means if there's too much excitation and too much inhibition, something needs to balance it out. So these upregulated neurotransmitters cause the release of calcium in the postsynaptic neuron. That calcium influx leads to synthesis of our endocannabinoids, anandamide and 2-AG. And they go back to the presynaptic neuron and bind to Cb2 receptor. The activation of this receptor causes stopping the release of calcium, and it stops the vesicles for releasing more neurotransmitters. So we can say that endocannabinoid system works like thermostat, like a capsule in an electrical fusion box. It's just saying, no, you've done too much, now you have to stop. And that's very elegant, wonderful system of keeping everything in balance, homeostasis. So I felt it was important for me to go very simply through the process, so we can have better understanding why cannabinoids in cannabis plant have these therapeutic effects. And some scientists postulate, and it was Dr. F. and Russo, that actually a lot of diseases that we suffer from are due to deficiency of this endocannabinoid system. Some people might be not making enough receptors or not enough endocannabinoids. And that's how we develop a disease state. So basically, endocannabinoid system plays a very important in maintaining, in establishing and maintaining the health state. Now, Entourage Effect. This is very, very important and significant. As doctors, we've been trained since the beginning of 20th century that therapeutic options are mostly, like I said, synthetic, single molecule synthetic agent. Now, it's very important to remember with the herbs and plants, like with cannabis, this is not just one medicine. There's just so many different ingredients working together. So according to this theory, which was coined by Professor Mechulen and his colleague in 1998, one molecule, one single component is not as effective as the whole working together. This is the synergistic effect. And for example, the modulating effect of CBD on psychoactive effect of THC is an example of entourage effect. But THC also is enhancing the therapeutic effects of CBD. So that's why we believe that the plant works best as a whole plant medicine. Also, let's not forget the other components, the terpenes and flavonoids, that possess many therapeutic effects as well. So once again, this is a very important aspect, especially now that there's a tendency from pharmaceutical companies to have isolates or synthetics. They may not be as effective. We have synthetic THC since the 1980s, but patients generally don't like them because they have too many psychoactive effects. They're not well tolerated. They're missing that modulating effect of other parts of component of the plant. Okay. So that leads us to a better understanding why cannabis is such an important medicine. It is a multi-target drug because it has the ability to interact with so many metabolic pathways in our body, as can help chronic pain, very important in palliative care, neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, Parkinson, motor neuron disease. It can help nausea and vomiting in chemotherapy patients, all because we are so densely populated with these cannabinoid receptors. It can help appetite. It can help PTSD, multiple sclerosis, gastrointestinal problems, especially ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. We have stories of patients in the mountains, the girls who were juicing cannabis leaves using the acid form of cannabinoids, and it gave them incredible improvement in their symptoms. Carol was talking about epilepsy, can help hepatitis C, fibromyalgia, dystonia. So according to the endocannabinoid system deficiency, my fibromyalgia is one of the clinical conditions that may be due to this deficiency. And a lot of opponents of cannabis say there's no evidence. When you go online, there's thousands of scientific papers. And you go on PubMed, there's lots of information. I think sometimes myself there's too much information for me to handle. But one of the very important reports was the report from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And the committee went through over 10,000 scientific papers for the last 10 years, and they came to a conclusion that cannabinoids are effective for chronic pain in adults, chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, spasticity symptoms in multiple sclerosis, and intractable epilepsy in children. There's also another important report from WHO about cannabidiol, emphasizing the therapeutic importance of cannabidiol and stating that this is a very, very safe medicine. It's a herb. And now we also have TGA guidelines formulated this year. They're a little bit biased, but what I say, they have a lot of good resources to study, so I find them useful as well. So a lot of information is happening. So if doctors are saying, oh, you go to your GBSA, there is not enough information, you can say, absolutely not. There's a lot of information, and evidence is happening. And the fact that TGA is allowing me now to prescribe, I think I am very, very optimistic about it. Although with the patient, they still have to show that they use everything else and that failed, so it's not first-line treatment yet, but I think it should and it will. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about chronic pain management. Sorry. This is very relevant to me as a general practitioner. Chronic debilitating pain is one of the most common presentations in general practice. But it is also one of the most common presentations for patients reaching for medicinal cannabis. It affects, bear with me, okay, I will learn it soon. Anyway, it affects about 20% of adult Australian population. That's a very significant number of people. It is believed that about 1/3 is due to of the chronic pain is due to injury, about 38%. Now, the other causes would be headaches, cancer-related pain, musculoskeletal condition, arthritis, lower back pain, surgical persistent pain, and non-specific lower back pain. Very interestingly, about 1/3 of the patient, the cause is unidentified. They're not sure why this is happening. And the cost to Australian economy is very significant. It is estimated that it costs us at least well over $30 billion per year in lost time at work and treatment costs. Now, the chronic debilitating pain, I deal with these people a lot. For many of them, dealing with that condition is almost like a full-time job. It takes 24/7 to deal with it. It affects people on multiple levels: emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, relationship, professional. These people quite often end up in having broken relationships. Their marriages break. They also unable to continue working. Their careers suffer as well. Financially they struggle because if they lose their job, they have to rely on Centrelink payment. So there's a lot of suffering. Also, quite often, the chronic pain is associated with so many other medical conditions: Ptsd, anxiety, depression, insomnia, obesity, chronic metabolic syndrome, leading to heart attacks, strokes, and many other debilitating problems. And polypharmacy. It is scary for me to see this patient when they come to see me, and some of them are on 15, 20 different medications. They take opioids, sleeping tablet, antidepressant, anticonvulsant, anti-inflammatory. The problem is that these medications, they usually don't fully control their pain, but they also have significant side effects. We know about opiates, drowsiness, gastrointestinal problems, constipation, and all of that is affecting patient functionality. Not only that they are in a chronic pain, but also they are unable to function properly. The things that we take up for granted, playing with our children, going for a walk, for these people is a major struggle. And some of them, unfortunately, develop drug addictions. They become dependent on all of that. So it is a bit of an evil situation. And when they come to see me, I'm thinking, what can I do? Keep on increasing their medication? That doesn't feel right. Now they go to pain clinic, and then in pain clinic they hear, oh, just practice positive thinking. But how can you meditate if you are in so much pain? There's something that has to help you. So a lot of them eventually, reluctantly, reach for cannabis. They don't want to smoke pot, but someone would encourage them. And then it becomes a life-changing situation for many of them. I'm not saying that it's a miracle drug. I'm not saying that it's a panacea for everything, but certainly it can help a lot on multiple levels. It can reduce all of this polypharmacy, because we know that cannabis can help pain, nausea, vomiting, depression, anxiety, and so many other conditions. So it's very promising. Now I just share the story of one of my patients that I was so fortunate to be able to prescribe cannabis for her. She's a lady in her early 50s, 130 kilo in weight. She was involved in a car accident at the age of 12, sustained back injury. That was followed by PTSD, anxiety, depression throughout her life, fibromyalgia, failed relationships, broken marriage, lost job, Quite a difficult situation. When she came first to me, she was unable to sit. So I'm sitting in my chair and she was walking around in my room, going like that. So we're talking and she's walking. And she wanted me to apply. I explained to her it's quite expensive. The estimate is about $350 per month. She said, I don't care. I really want you to get it for me. So I did apply. I filled in the form. I went home. Took me about 2 hours of my own time. I had to think how to word my clinical justification so it will be accepted by TGA. I had to think about the way how I will make it convincing, almost like working on a case. And it worked. 3 days later, I'm getting my approval. I almost felt like crying. I really did. Was really emotional about it. Anyway, I'm calling her and she's also quite excited. So we got everything organized. The medicine came to local pharmacy she picked up. She started using 1/2 ml of combination of CBD THC oil from legal channel. She doesn't have to be afraid now of being stopped by police. I gave her appropriate letter. And then about a week later, I'm seeing her and saying, how are you feeling? She said, for the first time in so many years, I had 6 hours sleep, uninterrupted sleep. Also, for the first time when she came to see me, she was sitting in a chair. She wasn't walking around. She also said that she lost her migraine headache. Her pain came down moderately from the level of 7 to 5. But for people who suffer from so much pain, it is a very significant reduction. And you know what she said? I think that comment she made about 2 weeks later. She said, I lost 3 kilos in weight because I stopped eating for emotional reason. Now I only eat when I'm hungry. And also another comment, she said, even though I still have pain, but my brain thinks differently about it. Doesn't bother me that much. And the most interesting comment was, which I was really fascinated, she said to me, my thinking is more clear. So how about being on dope? She said, it's amazing. I feel like something is like the curtain is opening. I think better, I'm not as foggy. I have to admit, one of the side effects is that she feels a bit fatigued in the morning. But she said, I can deal with that. So hopefully, I'm just very, very gentle with her because I forgot to mention, she's very sensitive to everything. She develops skin rash to every possible medication. So she tried everything, and the only thing she could tolerate was Panadol. So this is one of its really optimistic stories that gives me the courage, the excitement to go through all of those applications because I feel I'm making a difference in patient life. And for the doctor, it's the most rewarding experience you can have when you make a difference. So now, why does it work? There are many mechanisms of action. I'm not going to bore you too much about all of that. I am going to explain one of the aspects. Pain is a very important warning signal. Without pain, we can burn our food to death, completely without realizing. So it is important, it plays an important role in warning us that something is happening and we need to act. The reaction happens in just split second. So when we have a painful stimuli, the sensory neurons pick that information and that travels very quickly through the sensory neuron, goes to spinal cord, and then goes to brain. The brain registers, ouch, something is hurting. So very quickly sends the information back through the motor neuron, causes muscle contraction, and then we remove our hand. And it's a very good system. But if it's over time and doesn't want to stop, when we deal with this chronic debilitating pain, it's not a good thing to have. And because we've got these cannabinoid receptors at the level of peripheral neurons, in spinal cord, and in the center's brain. So when you have cannabinoids, when you have cannabis, they actually activate these receptors and modulate the pain perception at this level, peripheral nerve, spinal cord, and nerve. Because pain is not perceived as pain until our brain registered, oh, it hurts. There are also other, this is just one of the aspects, because cannabinoids are also very important anti-inflammatory. They work for anxiety, depression, and all of the other conditions. And they are also potent anti-inflammatory as well. Now, talking about pain, opioid epidemics, I think it's been mostly medically induced because patients take so many opioids, Oxycontin, Panadine Forte, and so on. We're dealing with this problem now. The deaths related to accident overdose of prescribed opioids are higher than of heroin. It is easier to obtain prescribed opioids than heroin in the street. And this is RCGP statistics, but of our 100% of all the overdoses, 80% is due to legally prescribed drugs, especially benzos and opioids. And Australia ranks number 8 about the top opioids users in the world. The number 1 is USA and Canada. And in states where cannabis is legal, they report the reduced trend of opioid abuse hospitalizations. Now, from 1st of February, our government restricted the codeine access. There's nothing over the counter. Patients have to see the GP. But I strongly believe that just restriction is not going to work. We need to give something. People need to be able to control the pain. And just positive thinking meditation is not going to be 100%. It is very significant, but we also need to give them some medicine that will work organically with their own system, endocannabinoid system, and so many other metabolic pathways. And I strongly believe that cannabis can work very well here. But GPs, doctors need a lot of education and changing this stigma and improving the awareness. So, just briefly, I'm going to go through some other basic medical conditions that cannabis can help. Here we have chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. There's so many anecdotal, I call it observational evidence, stories about patients who have been dragged out, going through chemotherapy, going through side effects and vomiting and nausea, and all the other therapeutic agents wouldn't help them. So cannabis has a very significant potential in this condition, nausea and vomiting. Why? Once again, we're coming back to the receptors, that cannabinoids have the ability to interact with cannabinoid receptors and other pathways. So, like activation of Cb2 receptors is involved in the regulation of nausea and vomiting. That's how THC works. CBD works also by interacting with some other receptors and many other aspects of that. Now, palliative care. Dying. We all face that. For some of them, it's going to be quick and smart. We go. For many of us, for many of others, unfortunately, it will be sad, long, and agonizing. What do we want? Do we want to be dragged up, feeling like a zombie, our pain not fully controlled, unable to communicate with loved ones, or we want something organic that will improve our functionality, improve our quality of life, make us pain-free, controlling our anxiety and depression, and first of all, being able to communicate with loved ones. And here I see the great potential in cannabis. I hear stories as well. People open up to me and say, my brother or mother or whoever, we use cannabis illegally, but what was important, he or she died, but they were a person till the end. And that's the most important part. Keeping that ability to communicate and going to another life, to wherever you go, in a state. And what's wrong being euphoric during that time? I personally wouldn't mind to be dragged up on anything because I'm dying anyway. So that's very, very important part. Now, PTSD. It is a very complex clinical condition affecting some individuals, especially war veterans, following traumatic events. These people are unable to forget. They're unable to process that completely, let go. Again, life becomes dealing with that broken record in their brain, playing the events over and over and over again. They suffer from insomnia, depression, anxiety. Quite often they develop behavioral problems, addictive problem like alcohol, and so on. So it is not fully understood, but one of the proposed theories is that probably dysregulation of endocannabinoid system is responsible for developing PTSD. And research shows that these people don't have enough anandamide, so the Cb1 signaling is impaired, and it's actually resulting in impaired fear extinction. Another one, multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease in which our own immune system goes against the myelin shapes surrounding our nerve cell. So depending on, so it can affect many systems in our body and result in many symptoms. And studies show that THC CBD formulation can be very effective in controlling spasticity in multiple sclerosis and resulting other symptoms. Epilepsy. Carol talked about epilepsy before me, so I'm not going to go into details, but we've been captivated by stories of children and their families suffering from this debilitating condition. Again, cannabis has been very helpful for them. In case of Charlotte, who is pictured here, it was high CBD formulation. But we also know that some of these children require a bit higher levels of THC. Opponents say that they don't know about the effect of THC on the developing brain. But we are not talking about healthy children. We are talking about really sick children whose life expectancy is reduced already. And we're talking about quality of life for these children and their families. Now, how bad is this cannabis? Here it shows that the most toxic is heroin. And here we see the cannabis where therapeutic ratio is about 1 to 20,000, meaning that one would have to ingest about 20,000 doses of cannabis to get the lethal effect, which I think it wouldn't be possible in many respects, even financial as well. Now, physical dependence, showing the addictive potential of cannabis. We know that everything is possibly addictive, even water. Some people drink 3 liters of water per day. So there is aspect of it, and that's why I think cannabis should be, patients should be guided by doctors. Like heroin ranks number 1, and the cannabis addictive ratio is 0.8. Where do we have cannabis here? And the causes of death, there is no reported deaths to cannabis, like purely to cannabis. But for example, pharmaceutical opioids rank number 4. So my summary of treatment options. As a doctor, I'm confident to say that I see the significant potential of cannabis as an important therapeutic agent. In my opinion, it should be used in a proper clinical setting. The patient should be guided by doctors, so side effects can be minimized and therapeutic effects maximized. But we need to understand that one fits all is not going to work in the case of cannabis. It is difficult to standardize. There are so many components in cannabis plant. It has to be patient-centered, based on individual dosing. Every patient is different. We need to utilize start low, go slow approach. We start with a slower dose and then gradually go up with that. To do it properly, we have to have access to different cannabis formulation, to different strains or chemovars. And so I'm hoping that the process of obtaining cannabis will become easier and easier, because that particular formulation may not be effective for the patient, but that doesn't mean that cannabis is not going to work. Maybe they need something else. So we need to have access to palette of different formulation. We also need to understand drug interactions because cannabis is metabolized in the liver, utilizing the same metabolic pathway, cytochrome P450, which is used by other drugs as well. So the doctor will need to understand that certain medication, their dosing needs to be reduced, or we need to do more monitoring. So there's a bit of a knowledge about it. And understanding the entourage effect, understanding it's not about synthetic isolates or just this or just that. It's best to have the access to combination. And it is a whole plant medicine. So I've been very involved in education, educating myself and communicating and speaking because I think it's very important, my role. It is an important role of mine as a doctor to stand up and say, yes, it is important, we need to embrace it. Part of it, I started the organization Medihuanna in October 2016. One of the aspects was writing a little book. That book is very humble book. Provides just very basic aspects of cannabis medicine. It's not pretending to be an academic paper. To me, it was also position of statement because I didn't find anything written by a GP. And I just wanted to show how the doctor thinks, how you do this, do this, do this, do that. I was trying to write in a very simple way, so it will be easy to follow for both lay people and as well as medical professionals who I used to be 2 years ago, but basically don't know anything about it. This book, if anyone is interested, is available for sale today. Just my team is waiting over there. And also, we are now, Medihuanna is working with RSCGP, Royal College of Australian Medical Practitioner, the body that's regulating our education, and we're preparing the course specifically for GP, and that course will attract continuous professional improvement, CPD points, so doctors on completion will get better understanding of cannabis medicine. I'm also sharing lots of practical information about how to prescribe, how to go about it. So I strongly believe that on completion of this course, any GP will have will develop better understanding of cannabis medicine and will feel more confident to prescribe it. That full accreditation, we've passed all the steps so far, and we expect this full accreditation should be happening within the next few weeks. We just need to work on some fine points. We need to provide a lot of evidence to support each statement with scientific research. So I am optimistic. It is happening. It is simply unavoidable, inevitable. Cannabis medicine will come back to the space where it deserves to be. Respected, proper medicine, prescribed by doctors, and will be taking full benefits of this wonderful plant. And I always like to finish on the quote from DA law judge Francis Young in 1988 when he said, whoops, what did I do? Oh, help. Oh, that's all right. What do I do?
Can you go back? Just go back slightly.
Right. I'm always clumsy with these things. Sorry about it. So, marijuana in its natural form is one of the safest therapeutically active substances known to man. By any measure of rational analysis, marijuana can be safely used within supervised routine medical care. To deny marijuana to patients who need it would be unreasonable, arbitrary, and capricious. And that comes from the law judge from Drug Enforcement Administration in 1988. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Well, thank you so much for that informative talk. And are there any questions, please?
Yeah, I'm just curious, with your legal patients that you prescribe to, can you see any light at the end of the tunnel as far as them being allowed to drive?
Well, I think the law is a little bit confusing right now, and I think we need to work on it. It's not clearly clear. It's not very clear yet. My patients, you just use it at night. Some of them have very low THC formulation. Some of them have. I just give them the letter from me, and we're hoping for the best. But I must say it's not very clear yet. We need to work on it.
Other questions? Yes?
In my case, it's other than just pain, I have complex PTSD as well. But as far as I know, it's not available to me medically just because I have complex PTSD.
No,
is that correct?
No, it's not correct. First of all, I actually obtained approval for that, but don't get excited. I can only see people who live in my area, which is Blue Mountains, because the TGA say that I need to formulate treatment plan, management plan, and these people have to see me on a regular basis. But I did obtain cannabis approval just yesterday for the patient who had also chronic debilitating pain. But the thing is, you have to show that you tried all the other medication and you developed side effects and you couldn't use it. So it's not first-line treatment, but it is possible. It can be done. I've done it.
Hi, thank you for that talk. My name is Robin. I have a daughter who is now 37 who suffers from schizophrenia for 22 years. I'm really aware that the pharmaceutical drugs that she has been on is actually damaging her mind. Now, 22 years later, I can say I'm an expert on this. I've been through a lot of hospitals and seen a lot of people recycled through those hospitals, and I know that a lot of the drugs are not working for a lot of the people. I'm just interested to know if you are aware of any studies being done on medical marijuana as part of a bigger protocol for people suffering from schizophrenia.
There was some study done in Europe, in Germany, that they just use CBD. And that was like a small study, few patients, not so many. They demonstrated that pure CBD was controlling psychotic symptoms better compared against the prescribed antipsychotic with fewer side effects. But I think at the moment, TGA and so on will be like a little bit worried about it. But CBD actually is antipsychotic as well, and there's research, supporting that.
Thank you again, please. Thank you so much. If you're interested in discussing